Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Discovery Debrief, your guided jaunt into discussing the latest trek into the final frontier, Star Trek Discovery. I'm co-host Chris Clow, and I'm joined by our regular panel of bold Trek franchise explorers, including Rachael Clow.
Hey.
Zaki Hasan.
Howdy.
And Cicero Holmes.
I am Stubbs.
Yes, you are. You are indeed. Well, you've likely noticed through the episode title that you probably saw right before you actually downloaded this episode and our slightly remixed intro that the subject of this episode isn't actually going to be Trek related. And that's for a couple of different reasons. One, Trek topics are a little light right now in the off season of Discovery. And two, the biggest movie ever is in an area of genre fiction that our panel all have managed to have opinions about and feel very comfortable in. So to that end, we're going to spend this episode talking about the decade-building culmination of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Avengers: Infinity War. But first things first, as always, let's check in with what our panel's been up to. How are you guys doing? And have you guys had any Trek absorption since the last time we all convened? Rachael, you're continuing Deep Space Nine.
Heck yeah. Season 6, baby.
Is it your favorite season?
So far. I mean, the last, 3 or so episodes I've watched have been kind of duds. I just watched the one where Quark has to become a woman.
Yeah.
And apparently learns nothing about women.
As he does. Yeah. Well, they can't all be spectacular.
That's true. They had to make 24 episodes.
But you did watch the one where Cisco brought the Federation or brought the Romulans into the war against the Dominion, which might be my favorite episode of the show.
Yeah.
It was really good. But yeah, you're in a good spot.
Heck yeah.
Cicero, now that you've completed Voyager, when do you think you're going to jump into another Trek show, or is that still sort of to be determined?
It's a little to be determined, but it will be soon.
And which one do you think that might be?
It will almost certainly be DS9.
Okay. All right. I can't blame you for going back to DS9. It's just such a great show. Zaki, it's been a while since we've talked. So how has your life in Trek been, even through all of the craziness that has come up since the last time you were able to join us?
I've put a pause on my rewatch. We were literally we paused it, me and the boys, right before All Good Things. So it's almost like we don't want to let go of The Next Generation just yet. And so whenever we pick up, it's going to be with that. But it's just we've been so busy with everything else going on that it's just putting a little pin in it. But we'll be back before too long.
Yeah, sure. That's understandable. Now, have you guys decided if you're going to include the movies when you do start it back up again?
That's actually a good question. I would imagine so, even though the boys have seen all of the movies already.
Right.
Except for Nemesis, which I have no desire to see. But I guess since that comes that comes after everything anyway, so I guess, I don't see why not,
Sure. Yeah.
They don't need to know it exists. They can just go their whole lives.
See, we need to do an episode of Nemesis because my hatred for it is minimal at best. And I would love to get into exactly what the source is for all of this antipathy that fandom at large seems to have for it. Like, they hate it more than the Phantom Menace. They hate it more than Elektra, it seems.
I don't think they hate it more
X-Men
than
The Last Stand.
Chris.
I don't know. It seems that way.
No, I don't.
Yeah, I think Chris is delving into he's hit hyperbolic speed.
You might say I've gone plaid.
I mean, it is an aggressively mediocre movie. It's offensive how it just puts a piece of tracing paper over Wrath of Khan and acts like nobody will notice.
All right. See, we're definitely gonna. I mean, I'm not gonna say that it's a masterpiece by any stretch of the imagination, and I don't think that Stuart Baird was the right person for it at all.
Yes.
But I mean, I do see some value in it that I guess other people do not, which is perfectly valid.
I mean,
but,
now that we're, what is it, 16 years out from its release, it's easy to just be like, it's another adventure with this crew who we love, and it's an opportunity to spend time with them since we're probably not going to get to again. But as far as the peak quality of Next Generation and Toto, to me, it's pretty far removed from, I don't know, Yesterday's Enterprise or something, in terms of...
Oh, sure. Yeah. And I don't think any reasonable fan would put it in that sort of category. But, it also... one place I will say that it absolutely fails is as a finale for the TNG crew.
Oh, very much so.
It just does not work at all on that level.
Chris, here's a question. This is for you guys, actually, because I was talking about this online with somebody. Given what we know where the Next Generation movies ended up with all four of them qualitatively, do you think it would have been better if the finale of All Good Things was the last that we ever saw of the Next Generation crew?
That's tough.
I would say no, because then we wouldn't get First Contact, right?
Right, even with First Contact, like on balance with the four movies.
You mean like it potentially if they had actually done what might have been one of the original plans and switched All Good Things and Generations, like if All Good Things was told on a cinematic scale, or do you mean just ending
just
full stop?
They didn't do any movies, but that was the last of the D.
No, I don't think that that's necessarily a price worth paying, considering my extreme affection for First Contact.
Well, and Chris, you and I will be going through and doing commentaries on all four of the Next Generation movies. So
yes, we will.
That's something to look forward to.
Looking forward to that, and we'll definitely have to do a couple of episodes of this show just to rope these two people into a discussion about them as well.
I'm saving my comments on Nemesis.
All right, fair enough. Well, we do have some news to get to real quick before we actually take our little detour into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So let us take a look at a couple of news items. So the biggest franchise news surrounds the future of Trek on film, with confirmation that Paramount is going after director S.J. Clarkson for the fourth Kelvin Timeline Star Trek film. Clarkson has directed episodes of Luke Cage and The Defenders, in addition to episodes of Dexter and Ugly Betty. She has one film under her belt, which is called Toast. And also Chris Hemsworth is set to return as George Kirk somehow, and there's been rumblings about his return to the franchise, I think since before Star Trek Beyond came out. And also, concurrently with that, Quentin Tarantino's movie project is still apparently developing, but potentially into a separate Trek film series. So how do we feel about this whole totality of cinematic Star Trek news? Zaki, why don't you start us off?
Well, most importantly for me, what made me happy about this announcement, above and beyond the director who, if I'm honest, I'm not familiar with her work, so I can't speak to her specifically, but we're getting more Kelvin movies.
Yeah.
That to me was the what made me happiest, and the fact that it is a female director, and that's some ground being broken for this franchise is that's like the icing on the cake for me. More above and beyond that was, hey, more Kelvin movies coming.
Yeah, totally. Rachel?
I don't think Quentin Tarantino's movie is going to happen.
That's what I said too. I agree with you. Yeah.
Like, this is just evidence that, I don't know, like they're like trying to occupy him or something. Like they're distracting him.
Maybe
something they don't want him to do.
And at this point, he's kind of a distraction, like with all of the news that has come out recently and the controversy that he was kind of caught up in. Maybe that doesn't have anything to do with it, but it feels like that could potentially detract from things that his name is on, particularly as it relates to an established franchise. Maybe we'll see. But yeah, time will tell. I wouldn't bet against you. Just saying. Cicero?
Too many timelines. 2 timelines. I stop my timelines at 2. I don't need a tertiary timeline. This is, I feel like I'm about to begin an episode of Batman, the 60s Batman. Right. So, yeah, I'm tending to agree with hashtag Rachel was right. And the fact that, yeah, maybe they're just trying to find some busy work for Tarantino, to allow him to, play with the tertiary timeline, Tarantino's timeline, is terrific or terrible in totality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I certainly don't disagree with any of that. I mean, it'll be interesting to see if Tarantino's movie does end up happening, if it's going to be a prime timeline movie or not. The only real thing that comes as far as like a wish list from my end is concerned, I'm thrilled, just like Zaki, that we're getting a fourth Kelvin timeline film, and Clarkson as the director sounds awesome. I'm sure that she'll do a great job. The only thing that I would want, and I think the only way it can happen, is if the Viacom CBS merger goes back through.
Yes.
Give me an Admiral Lorca in the alternate reality. I want to see it.
More Lorca, all
Admiral Lorca,
every day.
or a Captain Burnham, or President Saru. He became president of the Federation somehow.
It'd be hilarious if non-Mirror Lorca is the most boring, desk bound. You know, he's like the exact opposite of what we expect.
He works in HR.
Exactly. He's like the Picard. Remember the Picard
from Tapestry?
Yeah,
you're gonna say that. Oh, that would be pretty funny. I mean, that would be kind of sad, but I bet Jason Isaacs would have fun with it. Like, he would give him like a Poindexter-y voice,
right?
I'm HR manager Gabriel. Will you please turn? Thank you.
It's like a total throwaway scene, you know.
Oh well, who knows? But I mean, I would like to see some Discovery acknowledgement, presuming that merger does go through. It's like the only corporate merger that I'm actually rooting for, just because of my love of Star Trek. So
I hear you.
We'll see what happens. Last thing with news, we haven't touched on some pretty big developmental news with Discovery itself. First of all, we never addressed on this show the fact that actor Anson Mount was cast as Captain Christopher Pike of the Starship Enterprise, and the fact that production has begun on season 2. And Cicero, I'm sure you saw some very familiar looking uniforms that are going to be worn in season 2. That had to have tickled your fancy a little bit, but it looks like we'll actually also be stepping aboard the Enterprise. If some of there was a behind-the-scenes video that was released, particularly one of Burnham walking through to 3F Section 125 on the Enterprise, which corresponds with the location of Spock's quarters on the original series. So how do we feel like season 2 is shaping up? I mean, we don't know anything about plot details except the fact that the Enterprise is in the mix. So how is this all looking to you guys? Zaki, start us off.
I'm excited to see what they come up with. I really love Anson Mount being cast as Captain Pike. I mean, I loved him as Black Bolt, even though we didn't even hear his voice. But he was terrific on the Inhumans, and I've liked him in everything he did. He was actually the romantic lead in Crossroads, which is the Britney Spears starring vehicle, which also stared Uhura, Zoe Saldana. So,
now we gotta watch that for the.
No, you really don't.
Please, no.
What I told you is all you need to know about that movie. But he's a really good actor and he's a really good choice. So I mean, look at him; he looks like Jeffrey Hunter.
He does. Yeah, absolutely.
You know, so I remember, I don't know if I said it on this show, but certainly online, I was like, I hope we get Bruce Greenwood. But failing that, I have absolutely no problem with Anson Mount. I think that's terrific.
Yeah, well said. Cicero, how is it shaping up in your mind?
Well, I was surprised to hear Zaki say that he was terrific as Black Bolt. Because like the Britney Spears vehicle Crossroads, I tried to pretend like the Inhumans didn't exist. It never happened. It's in that tertiary timeline that Tarantino is working on.
I mean, I think the cast was better than the show. You know what I mean?
Sure, fair enough. Yes, there were great costumes. They spent all of their budget on costumes, and
they filmed it in my garage actually.
They spent and
you can see all my shit in the background. I mean, it looks like they had like $1.50 to make.
And your dog wrote it,
and they projected it on an IMAX screen, which is what you do with the TV show. Yeah.
Oh my gosh!
And Zaki's dog is actually Lockjaw. They just brought the camera up really close to him.
So I'm happy that he was still able to find work after the excrement that was the
but how do you really feel, Cicero? I'm not sure.
We're gonna have to start up Cicero's agony booth here if we're not too careful.
So I'm super happy to have him actually be in a role where he can speak and emote in a way that makes sense. So I'm looking forward to seeing him join the cast, and I guess time will tell to see how long Pike and the Enterprise crew will be around on Discovery.
Excellent. Rachel?
He's very handsome.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's all. I mean, I've never seen him in anything, so like he's handsome in a very Jeffrey Hunter sort of way.
So Jeffrey Hunter is handsome to you?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I figured because he's handsome to me, but
yeah, Jeffrey Hunter is very handsome to me. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm getting old because all of the like leading actors that are popular now have names that I've never heard of before, like Anson and Ansel, like
right.
Timothée.
Yeah, I guess so.
I'm old.
You're not old. You just turned 29, for God's sake. Rachel. Oh. All right. I'm excited too. I was actually pretty interested to see that, we're getting gold, red, and blue shirts back. It seems like they may have taken a little bit of a cue from the first Discovery tie-in novel, Desperate Hours by David Mack, because Mack actually goes into some pretty intense detail, because the Enterprise features very prominently in that book, along with Captain Pike, that Constitution-class ships and the Enterprise in particular, because of their prominence in the fleet, they have different uniforms. And at the time I was just like, well, he's just trying to rationalize the 50-year-old aesthetic with the clearly new aesthetic that was established on Discovery. And that might not end up being the case at all. Like they might actually be running with it, which is a pretty novel idea. Obviously, there are still some very specific and minute differences in the way that those uniforms and the aesthetic look that fandom will likely debate to hell and back. But overall, I mean, it looks like the presence of the Enterprise on Discovery is going to be as more truthful than we may have thought to the previously established aesthetic, and the fact that we know who Captain Pike is going to be is great. I'm still waiting on a number one casting announcement, and like the rest of Star Trek fandom, still waiting on a Spock announcement. Maybe that's a surprise they're holding. Maybe Quinto is up there and we have no idea. I don't know, but I'm waiting with bated breath. But let's move along to our main event.
Chris, real quick, actually, yes. I don't know if you mentioned this, and I think it's worth talking about that. The person who designed the new version of the original Enterprise talked about how legally they couldn't do a full-on replica of the Matt Jeffries design.
Right, yeah, I did see that, but then I saw that apparently one or two of the producers of the show then turned around and said that was not the case. It was an artistic choice.
No
so I'm
kidding.
not sure what to believe. We'll need to look into that a little bit more.
That's a developing story, it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. I think that it definitely does merit more conversation from us as a unit when more of the facts come out. But yeah, the only reason I didn't bring it up is because I don't know what to believe right now.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's interesting.
Do the reporting, Chris. Do
all right.
Hard-hitting journalism.
Well,
figure it out.
All right. I'll
Time
do
to
it.
put on your rumpled trench coat and fedora.
Magnifying glass.
And get my J. Jonah Jameson stogie out and do all of that stuff. All right. Yeah, I'll get on that. But let's move along to the main event of this episode, which is going to be our discussion, our detour into the Marvel Cinematic Universe by discussing Avengers: Infinity War. So the latest film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe has arrived with some major consequences for seemingly all of the characters in play. It's a massive cast, like everybody and their mother starred in this movie. But first thing we should warn everyone about, this is very much going to be a spoiler-filled discussion. We are not holding back, so if you have not seen Avengers: Infinity War and are planning to, you should probably turn the episode off here and start it back up after you've seen the movie. Consider yourself warned. First things first, though, let's go around the panel and just sort of briefly relate our associations and interest in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, along with your favorite single movie in the series thus far. Cicero, take us away.
I've seen them all. I've seen them all multiple times. I've seen them all in the theater. Except for, I think I didn't see Thor: Dark World in the theater. There was a reason.
That's okay.
Yeah. And my favorite film in the ethos of the MCU should come as no surprise, the recently released and record-breaking Black Panther.
Excellent.
Excellent movie.
Yeah, very good choice. Zaki.
My gosh, my favorite out of all of them is hard to pick because the best ones are all sort of clumped together.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you twisted my arm, I would probably say The Winter Soldier.
Good one.
Mm-hmm.
But I love this universe. You know, I as somebody who grew up just swimming in the Marvel Comics ethos all my life. I mean, for me, it's like Marvel and Star Trek and Star Wars. Those are kind of my triple crown. For 10 years now, I've been going to the theater every couple of months and watching come to life this thing that I grew up loving so much, you know, and it's just such a surreal place to be. You know, I'm sitting in the theater and I'm like, for Infinity War, and I'm like, this is Doctor Strange, and he's talking to Iron Man, and Rocket Raccoon is hanging out with Thor, and look, Black Panther is talking to the Vision, and and you're like, how did we get here? You know what I mean? Like, it feels like it doesn't feel real. You know what I mean? It's almost like we got this thing that's so amazing that's the reason Trump is president, because the debt comes something. The scales have to be balanced in some horrible way. You know?
Oh, the darkest timeline, but at least we get to go to the movies and be entertained in a great way.
There is that. Yeah.
It's a horrible thought experiment. Do you want to live in the timeline where there's no MCU, but Hillary Clinton is president?
Yeah. Well said. Rachel?
I have seen all of the movies. I've not seen them all in the theater.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see Iron Man when it came out and didn't really register on my radar at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I've only seen half of Iron Man 2 in the theater because I got sick during it and had to drag Chris out.
I was there.
Which
because
was,
you were watching Iron Man 2 in the theater. That's probably why.
Well, okay, no. What it was is that it was at an IMAX theater. It's one of the only real. It's not a LIMAX, like an actual IMAX projection theater. One of the only ones in North America. We were sitting way too close, and Iron Man 2 has shots that are zoomed in while he's zipping around the air a lot, and she just got nauseous. Like, it's as simple as that.
Well, I was also, because let's not rehash all the times I threw up.
Right.
But I think I was sick as well, and it didn't help.
Well,
the situation did not help.
Now it just makes me feel worse about it. Okay, well, so
so kind of a rocky start to it for me. I would say that my favorite movie is the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first one that I really felt like it that movie was for me, where it was like, it was what I wanted to watch.
Yeah.
I really love that movie. And I would say, like, over the last year, they've been really knocking it out of the park for me.
Okay.
Spider-Man Homecoming, I loved. Thor Ragnarok, I loved. Black Panther, I loved. It was so, on the whole, I'm a lot more lukewarm than a lot of people, but over the last year, I've really
dove into it and been happy with it.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah, as for me, everything goes back to comics for me. Like the reason that I write today is because of comics. I got my start writing comic book reviews for BatmanOnFilm.com. And so my in when I was a young kid was all DC except for Spider-Man the Animated Series in the early 90s. That was my only non-DC comic book character consumption, pretty much, was the Spider-Man Animated Series, occasionally the X-Men show, and occasionally some of the other shows from that same production team like Hulk and Iron Man, but mostly Spider-Man. But when I started working as a comic book retailer in September of 2007, that's when I really discovered full bore the Marvel Comics universe and dove in head first. And my knowledge of Marvel Comics it's not quite at my level of DC Comics, but working in a comic book store for 8 hours a day, you can dive into a big back issue section and become an expert. And that's what my mission was to do. And I'm certainly not an expert when it comes to comparing to other people, but it was enough to get me through working at a comic book store where I could competently answer questions about Squirrel Girl when they came up. So I feel like my deep dive was sufficient enough to actually get full bore into the continuity of Marvel Comics. And that's when I discovered my favorite Marvel character was Captain America. Thank you, Ed Brubaker, and Mark Waid, and George Perez and Kurt Busiek. But my favorite MCU movie, like Zaki, it's The Winter Soldier, but like Rachel, the movies over the last year and a half or so, they're all good to varying degrees, I think, except for maybe Thor: The Dark World. I have enjoyed every single MCU movie, though. And picking between Winter Soldier and Spider-Man Homecoming and Black Panther is really tough for me personally, but since Cap is my favorite Marvel character, I have to give the nod to Winter Soldier, and I love that story so much anyway. So that's pretty much where I stand and where I'm coming from. So let's give overall impressions of Avengers Infinity War, the culmination of all of these movies that we've all watched. This is number 19, I think, isn't it?
Yes.
So, I mean, 19 movies, it's not small potatoes. The MCU is going to outnumber Bond movies before too long. So, Cicero, give us your overall impressions of Avengers Infinity War.
So 90% of this movie was the most because of the history that we've all had as fans with the universe, with the MCU. It was 90% of this movie was the most impactful film that I may have ever watched in terms of especially in terms of action and sci-fi and what this movie has meant, being actively engaged in this universe for 10 years, going to multiple movies throughout the course of those 10, throughout the course of that decade. Then the last 10% happened and it immediately went away. But what a fun ride. Like it was incredibly enjoyable. In terms of a film in a vacuum, what a blast. Great film.
Excellent. Zaki, how about you?
Yeah, I'm right there with Cicero. I mean, I think obviously this is less a culmination than the beginning of the culmination, and obviously that's a good thing to know. But again, I really appreciated the experience of experiencing it, if that makes any sense. Again, just sitting there and letting it wash over me and be like, this is what they've been building for 10 years. And the way it rewarded people who've been along on this ride. I mean, this really is not aimed at people who are like, "What's a Marvel?" And then this, it's just not for them. It just so happens that these movies have made like $14 billion, something crazy. So there's a very deep pool of people who are already completely on board, and this is a present for them.
Right.
And that's not a bad thing at all,
No, absolutely not. Yeah, I think the point is very well taken. Rachel?
I liked a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was a good movie and it was well constructed, and there's a lot of people in it and none of them felt underserved by the movie, which is pretty impressive. That being said, it made me really depressed and kind of resentful, which I don't like feeling that way after I've seen a movie. And I mean, I can talk more in depth about what upset me later, but just in general, it just kind of upset me in a very unsatisfying way.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, understandable. When I was tasked with writing a review of this movie, I couldn't do it. Yeah. Because, well, and as people who've seen the movie know, I've seen arguments out there that this is a complete story in the sense that there was a character who set out to do something and did what he set out to do. But we know that guy isn't the main feature player of this entire world that's been being built for the last decade. So I don't buy that argument. I do not think that this was a complete story. And that's where most of my, I guess, sense of dissatisfaction comes from. But even though that's the case, I mean, I was reasonably sure it was going to be a cliffhanger going into it, and nothing can take away from the power that this movie had over me from moment to moment. I mean, it was just sheer ecstasy seeing these kinds of interactions that we've all been kind of thinking of over the course of watching these movies for the last decade. And seeing that service, like Rachel said, seeing that service get paid in a substantive way to this enormous cast had to have been just a titanic Herculean effort. And it paid off. The way that you watch this movie is completely dependent on the way that you've absorbed the other ones. So in that sense, I can't really say that Infinity War stands on its own, as Zaki alluded to, but it definitely does reward you. And if you have a favorite character, chances are they got their moment in this movie. Even ones that are relatively lesser used, like my favorite guy, not very highly used in this movie. That's okay, though, because he has my favorite moment in the movie. And I wanted to see it again just so I could see that moment again. And I want to see it again, because there are several other moments that I want to relive in the theater, because those moments and those characters have that kind of power that only comes from a long track record. And now that we're seeing the rewarding payoff to that, even if Infinity War only hints at what that payoff's going to be, that's pretty cool. So, I guess that's kind of a review on my end, but not quite. Anyway, so going into this movie, which characters, single or plural, were you dialed into the most? Like, whose story did you really want to see unfold next? Zaki?
Definitely Captain America. Like you, he's probably my favorite character in the MCU. And like you, I was a little disappointed by his overall lack of screen time. But I think also, like you, I loved the big sort of showcase moments that he got. I think his intro in this movie.
Yes, that's it.
Dude, oh man, dude! I wanted to stand up and just like start applauding. It's so perfect,
Yeah.
And it tells you something about how completely Chris Evans has taken ownership of this character, that he shows up looking about as non-Captain America like as possible. He's got this big beard, and he doesn't have the shield. His uniform's all messed up, but you're like, that's effing Captain America.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the moment that I was talking about. I had to see that again.
So perfect, yeah. And I'm seeing the movie again in less than an hour, and seriously, no joke. I'm like looking forward to experiencing that moment with the crowd again. You know,
And kudos to Alan Silvestri, because
Right?
holy hell, he brought it. I was just listening to that track earlier today on my way home, and I'm just going to get gas, and I'm like, yeah, you know?
Fill up on 3.
Exactly. Cicero,
Regular unleaded. So I don't know if I went into this film looking for a specific character. Maybe Thanos. Because we've been teased with Thanos so much outside of the Guardians films, where he was a bigger character, but even then he was still kind of like this. He was kind of like the wizard behind the curtain. For those films. When I see an Avengers film, and actually sometimes when I see a Captain America film, it's more about all of the characters coming together, more so than it's about a specific character or wanting to see their portion of the character. Almost kind of different from the way that I approach crossovers in comics, because you definitely have your favorites, and mine was Spider-Man. Mine is Spider-Man, and when I read crossovers, I would start with his portions of the issues first, and if they were good, then I go and get the rest of the issues, or wait for the trade and get the trades.
interesting.
But like this was. I don't think there was a particular person, and because of that, at least for me, I really was able to enjoy most of the portrayals of the characters, and enjoy the kind of the mismatch, the ambrosia of these characters intermixing and intermingling, and Tony Stark and Star-Lord, Tony Stark and Doctor Strange, Tony Stark and more Spider-Man. Maybe I really wanted to see Tony Stark. I don't know. It was a hell of a lot of fun.
Excellent. Rachel, I think I know the answer.
I wanted to see Guardians of the Galaxy and meet Thor.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not disappointed.
Yeah. Coming off of Ragnarok, and he runs into your guys.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. And yeah, for me, unsurprisingly, it was also Captain America. And exactly like Zaki said before, yes, he didn't have all that much to do in this movie, but holy hell, his intro made up for it. And I can't even describe it. I was so nervous that he wouldn't survive the movie that every single time he was on screen, I was just holding on. I was just relishing it every single moment. When Vision is about to get pounded into the ground in Wakanda and he doesn't have backup, who shows up that I sure as hell wasn't expecting? Captain America. And just like, I just can't even describe. Like, it almost, as much as I welled up in the intro, I was just like, when Cap ran through, and I was like, "Oh no, is this it? I don't know. Oh God!" So I was pretty dialed into Cap, but I mean, also like Cicero, I was pretty much along for the ride for everybody. Seeing Spidey again was great. Seeing T'Challa again was spectacular, and Black Widow and Falcon got their moments too, which was great. And I would have liked to have seen Ross see Bruce Banner, but
Like, you're not the same guy.
Right. Yeah, maybe. Oh, well. I mean, it's a comparatively minor thing overall. One thing, I'm actually going to jump over one of the points that you guys see to something that I think is a little more interesting, and certainly something I want to know the answer to. What do you think surprised you the most about the way that this movie played out? There were certainly a lot of surprises, a lot of hushed tones in multiple places in the theater, at least with the audience that we watched it with for the first time. Zaki, what surprised you the most as someone who's so dialed into this world, as someone who's familiar with the source material that this movie is based on? So you probably had less surprises than a lot of other people did. So what actually did manage to surprise you?
In terms of the story as it unfolded, I can't say anything was like, oh my gosh, I didn't see that coming. I basically everything as it happened, I was like, oh, okay, cool. Oh, okay, cool. And I mean that in that I was like totally on board with it. I would say on a more meta level, I was surprised at how emotional an experience it was, even knowing that we're seeing something that's sort of that we know has to be sort of undone. I don't know if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does.
I mean, certainly for me, the closing moments of the film where we see Spider-Man just kind of
Oh my God.
away, and he's like, I don't want to go, and he's just scared. And again, objectively, we're like, well, Spider-Man: Homecoming 2 is coming out in like 2 years, so it'll get better. You know what I mean? I got better, but it doesn't make that moment any less gripping. And with that in mind, all the other pieces, and this is something I really appreciated more on the second time, when Peter Quill finds out that Gamora has died and the way he F's everything up, basically.
Yeah.
And it's a moment that, on the one hand, you're frustrated with the character because you see sort of how he's screwing everything up. But the way Chris Pratt plays it, to me, my heart broke. Mm-hmm. Because he acted in a way that's entirely human, and on my other show, Glenn Greenberg, who joined us, he made a comparison which I would not have thought to make, but I found it very apt. He said it's almost like what they did with Peter Quill in this is what George Lucas attempted to do with Jar Jar Binks, which is a foolish character who, in a moment of foolishness, dooms the universe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see that thesis pretty clearly. That is kind of the result.
I mean, I would never have thought of that, but I was like, I think you're right.
Yeah, definitely. Cicero, what surprised you?
I think that the thing that surprised me most was how well they were able to blend the tenor and flavor of each and every one of the Marvel films into this film. In the beginning of the film, you could feel the tonal shifts. Going from the beginning with coming right off the end of Thor Ragnarok, it still kind of felt like that, it felt like the extended version of that end. And it went super dark with Loki dying, and then getting treated with Iron Man right after that. It felt like an Iron Man, Captain America, Avengers film. And all of those, I think, tonally feel very, very similar. Doctor Strange, that moment with Doctor Strange and Wang and Bruce Banner. Felt like Doctor Strange, even, obviously they're in the Sanctum Sanctorum at that particular moment, but it felt like Doctor Strange, and then immediately going from there with Spider-Man, it felt like Spider-Man, and then going into space felt very, very much like, the introduction of the Guardians was completely Guardians of the Galaxy.
Totally.
Them, in space, the font was very Guardians-ish. Them singing the song, and everyone just kind of getting along, and just everything felt right. Like there was all of this fan service to all of the different fandoms coming and merging together. I thought that was really surprising. And then, of course, when they go to Wakanda, they're playing the Black Panther theme. So again, immediately you feel like you're right. You're right back in those individual films in one giant film.
Yeah, definitely. With Thanos as the through line,
right,
driving everyone together.
Right.
Rachel, what surprised you?
I guess Red Skull.
Yes. No kidding.
Honestly, there wasn't a ton of surprises. I was surprised by how much I liked the parts that I liked. I didn't have huge expectations.
Oh, I know you didn't.
Because, to be honest, I found the other two Russo brothers movies to be a little bit forgettable.
I know you did.
This is a constant source of strife in our marriage.
Not even Spider-Man elevated Civil War for you.
I mean, I like Spider-Man.
All right.
I liked that part of it. It's like,
enough.
I don't know, like you put it in front of me and I'm like, yes, I enjoy this, but like, then I can't remember it.
Fair enough. All right. Well, so you didn't really have that with this one.
No, I remember this one.
Okay.
And I can't tell you what's going to happen 6 months from now, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to remember this one because it traumatized me.
Well, we'll watch it again when it comes out on Blu-ray.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as for me, Rachel took the words right out of my mouth, the Red Skull. We were talking minutes before we walked into the theater. We ate at an IHOP before we went and watched the movie. And some friends that we went with were saying, who isn't showing up in this movie? And I said, well, we haven't heard anything from Red Skull. Hugo Weaving's probably not going to ever come back. And Rachel even said, well, maybe he will be in it. And I was like, he's not going to be in it.
Right.
He's not going to be in it. And then when they go to get the Soul Stone, and the face slowly gets revealed, I literally went, oh! As soon as I realized who it was, because I genuinely didn't expect the Red Skull to show up again. Hopefully he'll get back to Earth, and hopefully we can get other stories with him. I know that Chris Evans is a little bit hot and cold on whether or not he has a future in the MCU after the next Avengers movie, but I mean, I would love to see a modern day Red Skull Cap story in the MCU. I think a movie would deserve that. But yeah, by far, in a movie that had a fair amount of surprises, that one for me was the biggest one. Okay, Zaki, how are you looking on time?
I'm okay. I got a couple more minutes.
Okay.
I can jump off whenever you want me to.
No, it's up to you. How many minutes can you?
Say 5:40 my time.
Okay,
so it's like seven more minutes.
We'll jump through at least one more then with you. So, okay. All right, so how did you guys feel Thanos measured up to the villains that have been previously established in the series thus far? For me, he's second to the Red Skull. Red Skull was my favorite MCU villain. What a shock, I guess. But I was just shocked at the dimension that was added to Thanos. But what do you guys think? Zaki, start us off.
What really struck me is how much humanity Josh Brolin was able to imbue into this sort of motion capture creation. And I was just amazed at how I was just like, that is Josh Brolin. That is Josh Brolin as Thanos. Oh, sure. Yeah. And just as a contrast, and I don't mean to dogpile on DC movies, but like, my complaint about Justice League, which I liked, the movie I liked, but Steppenwolf was this CGI whatever that sounded like Kyron Hines. And I remember saying at the time, I'm like, what? You got this great actor, put him in makeup, do some motion capture, let us see him, Mm-hmm. And this is what I wanted there. I wanted a performance. And the fact that, I think his motivation, if you step back a little bit, it's a little goofy, because it doesn't make a lot of sense. I think in the comic books, they at least found a way to get to the place where what he's doing makes sense within what he's trying to do. However, I didn't even mind that because it just felt like a fully formed character. I didn't feel like I was watching an effect walking around.
Yeah, sure. He had belief imbued in what he was doing.
When you see tears rolling down his cheeks, you're like, I believe what I'm seeing,
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Rachel,
yeah,
Thanos.
His CGI was good. You could tell it was Josh Brolin.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good. And he didn't feel like totally unreal,
mm-hmm.
like a lot of CGI villains. I didn't buy his reasoning for what he was doing. It didn't make any sense to me.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, so it's some sort of like benevolent genocide or like apolitical genocide.
It's like, why don't you try doubling everything?
Right.
Make things more plentiful, just a theory.
Yeah, like if you have that, why do you want to have to kill people? if you're all powerful. And I don't know, I felt almost like a deliberate, like you're like deliberately trying to make any, like, we don't want this to be construed as us making a statement, any sort of political or moral statement in any way. Like, I just want to kill all of people apolitically, no reason. Don't worry about, no, he doesn't, no, like, it's okay. And I also didn't believe that I didn't fully buy into his love for Gamora. It just seemed like it popped up when the plot needed it to.
Even after having established their relationship in Guardians 1, you didn't think it was followed upon? Yeah, but
it was like, I don't know. I get that he was her dad. Like, I wasn't like, oh yeah.
No, I know. Yeah.
But like, he was abusive and terrible, and I didn't like him sort of being like, oh, but he really loved her. Like,
I see.
I was like, yeah, but he was abusive and terrible to her, and they're like, oh yeah, but just so you know, he really loved her. So then he kills her, and it just rubbed me the wrong way, I guess.
Okay.
And just sort of added to the level of bleak disappointment that the whole thing was permeated with in my experience. So
okay, yeah. I understand. Cicero, your impressions of Thanos?
I think, you know, in all sorts of art, the best villains are ones with whom the viewer, the consumer, can empathize. And I feel like you're right, Zaki, in that if you take a step back, the rationale doesn't make a lot of sense. But in the moment, the passion with which he delivers his plan and the way he explains it is like a fast talker. It's one of those moments where you're sitting down with someone and they're saying these things and they're nodding their head and you wind up nodding your head with them in agreement. And then you walk away and you're like, wait a minute. Right. I tell you, it's a really humdinger of a plan. I'll tell you what. But yeah. So I mean, this performance was truly phenomenal. And you know, I said very similar things about Michael B. Jordan's Eric Killmonger in Black Panther and the debates that the real world debates that his motivations and his ideology spurred as a result of after the film was concluded and people were able to see it. I don't think that Thanos's motivations and his ideology will spur the same type of discourse, but I feel like the performances were definitely on par in terms of believability and effect and the fact that we're talking about a human character playing a human character, and his performance was, fully realized as a human versus a human character mocapping a interstellar, omnipotent being, and that was the performance that, was completely CG. The fact that you were able to see that emotional range from Thanos was really was remarkable. I think actually it harkens back to what we talked about last week in when we did the book review, and how Adrian Kodos had a very similar ideology and with regards to how he thought he could save his one small colony. The thoughts are exactly the same, and I guess I kind of mimic I echoed the same sentiments last week and sounded like it was right. It sounded like
Kodos made way more sense. Right. All right, that was an emergency situation. Kodos was not all powerful.
It's also surprising to me. It's surprising to me that Zaki, you thought that the comics made more sense as far as his motivation was concerned, because I thought the opposite. I mean, in the books, he operates, at least in Infinity Gauntlet, out of his love for manifestation skeleton lady.
Right. Well, I guess what I'm saying, so I guess what I'm trying to say is that doing this really kind of ridiculous thing, you kind of say, what would prompt that? And it would be something that's equally ridiculous, which is, I need to prove to Lady Death how much I love her. I'm going to wipe out half of existence. I mean, that's
to feed death.
It's preposterous, but within the framework that they've established, you can be like, okay, I guess, right? Whereas here, he's like, I want to, like, there's too much, suffering, and if we get rid of half the people, there'll be less. Like, it's one of those things where if you look past the fast talker, as Cicero said, you're like, well, wait a minute, wait a tick. Again, snap your fingers and make more stuff, and then but it's not a deal breaker for me. I want to be very clear about that. It's one of those things where you're like, oh, okay, cool, I guess.
Well, I didn't get these like political implications or apolitical implications, if you want to call them that, personally. I mean, the way that I looked at it is that his compassion is a self-delusion. Like, he sees attaining the ultimate power of the Infinity Gauntlet as a method by which he'll be able to feed his deeply seated sadism. So he's telling people, I'm doing you all a favor by blinking half of you out of existence, when in reality, he just wants to cause the death and destruction. I mean, maybe he has more in common with watching the universe burn, in order to paraphrase, as opposed to actually trying to serve some greater good. That was the impression that I got. Like, that's just a mask for what he really wants to do, because he wants to do it, because he's crazy.
Okay.
You're shaking your head at me.
Well, I don't think that was explicit in the text of the movie. I guess
Gamora says to him, "You're insane." I mean, she doesn't buy this idea that he's trying to push forward of benevolence through genocide, as you said. She doesn't buy it, and he could very well be deluding himself. I don't know if that's necessarily a headcanon thing. I mean, you have people in the story who are telling him, you're insane for wanting to do this. And he says, no, I'm not. And I don't know. It seems more practical to me. And we're also halfway through the story.
Fair point.
So, all right. Well, so we pretty much established everything that we did like about this movie. And there's a lot to like about it. But a movie of this size, and a movie that has to, at least on the business end, and on the narrative end, because it has to check so many different boxes, there has to be some stuff that maybe we didn't come away with liking particularly well. As the resident critic of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Rachel, why don't you express what you maybe did not like about the movie? Like you said it earlier on that the ending left you depressed. It doesn't mean that you necessarily didn't like the ending, though, right?
I didn't like the ending.
You didn't like the okay, so but including the ending, what else? I mean, expound on your thoughts on the ending.
All right, strap yourself in.
Okay, all right.
Okay. I'm not as mad about this as I was on like the day after I saw it.
Okay.
So, all right, I have to kind of like try and rechannel some of my feelings.
I don't want to go. I don't want to go. Does that help?
Good impression.
Okay.
Chris, good.
All right.
Yeah. I actually did like that part. So like,
I getting stabbed in the
so
gut.
that doesn't help. But so I didn't like how it immediately Alien 3's Thor Ragnarok. And I say Alien 3 as a verb because Alien 3, so you spent all of Alien 2 like trying to save the Newt and Bishop, and then Alien 3, they're like immediately dead.
Right.
And I just like really hated how the first thing you see is like this movie that I loved is like, Valkyrie, she's dead probably. As Guardians, now they're all dead, or
half of them.
Okay, maybe it looked like all of them were dead. Heimdall, dead.
Yeah.
Definitely dead.
Loki.
I think
Loki,
Valkyrie,
real
we
dead.
can safely assume she is not dead. That's just my sense.
It is kind of an oversight, though, as one of the bigger characters of that movie. For her not to appear in the opening is a little suspect. I mean, I understand that everybody's in this movie already, but we are going to be asking that question if and when there is another Thor movie.
Yeah, I feel like Tessa Thompson tweeted something about it, a joke about it.
Oh,
but
did she?
I didn't forget what it was. I don't think it was illuminating. I think it was just a joke.
Oh,
She
okay.
was like, yeah, I'm not in it.
Mhm.
What else did I... Okay, and then the ending. Now, all right, the ending. I do not hate sad endings. I love sad endings. You know this, Chris, right?
Yes, I do.
I loved Logan. He's
Uh-huh.
dead as a doornail. Spoiler alert for Logan.
Your favorite Star Wars movie is probably Empire.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, I like the OG Star Wars.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
Episode 4, if you have to.
I stand corrected.
But I like Titanic. I like sad things like that.
Okay.
So it's not that it was sad, it's that it was sad in a really unresolved way because I know they're trolling me. Like, they're like, look at this horrible, sad thing,
Mhm.
but watch us kill our brand new, super popular superheroes
Mhm.
that have announced sequels to their films coming out. And so, like, it's not really sad, but I'm very sad because I'm watching these people fade out of existence who I've come to care about, but I can't actually be sad. And like they just needed more. So like the thing that makes you sad and gives you like that completion is like the reactions of the people who are left. And the only like bit that we really got of that was like Iron Man and Peter Parker's kind of interaction.
See, I don't. What about Okoye though? Do you remember how she reacted?
Yeah, but then it's like there's these reaction shots of watching someone sort of fade away, right?
Yeah.
I wanted a little, just a little beyond that to like, what are we gonna do?
Okay.
Like, you need the like, to bring it back to Empire Strikes Back. I needed personally to feel resolved
Mhm.
was like the Luke and Leia staring out the window kind of scene, or just something
that left you with more of a sense of possibility.
that they're gonna do something. Something's gonna happen. It's just they chopped this movie in half with scissors.
And I know I had to explain to you afterward who Captain Marvel was. So not even retroactively, you don't get a sense of possibility.
And then I
that?
sat through the entire goddamn credits. Feel like there's gonna be the after credits scene that's gonna make me feel like, all right, let's go watch. And then I did not understand anything about that. It's just like, oh no, here's some more characters you like, and they're fading out of existence. Bye.
But but the space beaver.
Space Beaver. And so that was just my personal feeling about it.
I actually agree with your point, Rachel, and I think it's very valid, because definitely the response I had initially was they're setting the cliffhanger with stakes that are so big that, like, on an intellectual level, you're like, well, we know they need to hit like the reset button to get back to some kind of status quo, so it almost like it doesn't hang together as well as, like, this is an analogy I made earlier, right? Sometimes destroying 3 planetary systems, like in The Force Awakens, that's not as effective as just sticking a shiv through Han Solo. Right. That one death is more emotional. And I think that was some of my initial response to this, where I was like, well, we watch Black Panther turn into dust. It's like, well, is Black Panther going to really be, you know what I mean? Like, we know he's not.
Yeah.
But the thought I had definitely upon second viewing was, I was like, that concern from me, when you really think about it, that's a concern that'll be for 1 year. And then forever after, that's never going to be a concern again. Like, these movies will exist as a complete whole forever.
Yeah.
So
true.
It's a purely temporary concern,
Well, and one of the things that I want to inject into this before, if Cicero has a response right before that, one of the screenwriters, Christopher Marcus, had an interview with BuzzFeed, and he was asked about Avengers 4 specifically. And he said, Avengers 4 doesn't do what you think it does.
Oh,
it's
please.
a different movie than you think it is. Also, the deaths are real. I just want to tell you it's real, and the sooner you accept that, the sooner you'll be able to move on to the next stage of grief. But then, immediately after that, in the same interview, Steve McFeely, who's one of his co-screenwriters, says, we're writing Infinity War and even shooting. There's no Black Panther movie. We don't know it's going to be so good, so effective, and so resonant, and we had to treat all these characters the same. People who leave us in Infinity War are the leads of their own franchises, and Black Panther is no different. So how does that not contradict, what was said before? I don't necessarily buy in personally to the idea that Avengers 4 is going to be totally different, except for maybe a couple of the deaths might stick. Maybe Gamora's death will stick, and that will be what drives the plot for Guardians 3 in trying to get her back. Maybe Mephisto's involved or something. They have to go and find her. But, who knows? But Cicero, do you have any thoughts on Rachel's expressions about the ending?
Hashtag Rachel was right. Hashtag Rachel is right. Well, and I kind of led off my comments about this movie in the same way that like 85% of this film was probably the most impactful Marvel film that I had ever seen.
Sure.
As a result of all the, the collection of all the movies that we had seen. So, we get into this film and we're not 10 minutes in before Loki is dead and Black Heimdall is dead.
Yeah.
So it's just like, and, not to mention Valkyrie, who presumably was on the ship, is also dead. Like, so all of these characters from one of the last two Marvel films that you had seen prior to this one that you loved, 3 of those characters are already gone before we've even seen the opening scroll for the film, the title scroll for the film.
Honestly, I think Heimdall got me more than Loki did personally.
Yeah,
and it never even occurred to me that Valkyrie is dead. If I'm being totally honest.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just that like. It's just like, why are we doing that? And, or we do that and then we lose Gamora. We've lost the Collector, presumably. All of these people are dead. And I was along for the ride with that. Like, I was like, at that point, and, maybe it's just that I've got some, internal bias against Zoe Saldana. So I don't know where it comes from. Yeah, right. Exactly. But like, I felt the gravitas of her death. And then, and it made sense in the moment. And for her to be gone, it was like, whoa, this is really heavy. Mm-hmm. There's something wrong with the gravitational pull in our future. So Back to the Future joke for those of you, those of you nerds who didn't get that one. But like when we got to the end, and as everyone, as Zaki has coined the phrase, as everyone's starting to dust, as they're getting dusted, when we saw Bucky dust away, I was still like, oh man, this is heavy. And then when we saw Black Panther, I was like, wait a minute, and that's, that was the moment for me where I emotionally checked out.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
That was the moment for me where I was like, oh, they're going to hit the reset button on this. I didn't. And the other thing is that I didn't really go into the film aware that this was going to be a cliffhanger, that I knew that there was going to be another Avengers movie, another Avengers film planned for next year, but I wasn't sure where it was going to be and what direction it was going to take. And then as I realized, like, wow, this movie is super long and we're getting towards the end and we don't really have a resolution, that, oh, okay, yeah, we're going to get a sequel or a part 2 to this film. And then as the characters started dusting away, the characters that they chose to get rid of just it just pulled me out of. It didn't pull me out of the experience, but it emotionally pulled me out of the experience. Had they chosen Cap and Iron Man, because it was so very specific, the characters that they chose. All of the Guardians except for Rocket. So they're coming, the Guardians are coming back, and it would have, when you have an ensemble cast, you can lose one or two and still move on. And, and obviously the tenor takes a little bit of a tonal shift as a result of these characters being gone, but the Guardians can still continue. But when you lose Doctor Strange, who hasn't had a sequel yet, when you lose Black Panther, who hasn't had a sequel yet, when you lose Spider-Man, who has a sequel coming, and you don't lose Iron Man, who you've been, who you've lived with now for 10 years on the big screen, and you've lived with Steve Rogers for 8 or 9 years, and Bucky for 8 or 9 years on the big screen. When those aren't the guys that are dusting away, that's when you realize, oh, okay, there's some shenanigans going on. We're going to get into the true comic book realm where no death is permanent.
Well, and that's actually sorry, Zaki, please.
No, sorry, Chris. I don't mean to cut you off, but I mean, I think this goes to what I said earlier. I think we're looking at this the wrong way. This is the middle part of the Infinity War story. So we don't know who we're going to lose in order to get back everyone who we think we've lost.
Right.
And I think that's really crucial. So, I mean, I'm willing to put money down that Tony Stark will be lost. Will be the cost, and I think that's, again, when this 2-part movie is a complete thing forever, we're going to look at it that way. We're not going to look at it in terms of, look at all the people who we thought died in the middle. We're going to be like, look who died at the end.
Well, and it's funny too, especially as a longtime comics reader, it seems like movies always eventually echo the conversations that you have within the walls of a comic book store, because now the oft derided concept of comic book death is creeping its way into and granted, there's already a bit of a stereotype when it comes to comic book death. I mean, I'm old enough where I remember Bucky being part of the conversation where, well, if you're not Uncle Ben or Thomas and Martha Wayne or Bucky, then you're going to be permanently dead. And now that even isn't
the good old days
accurate anymore. Yeah, right. But one of the things
I just want to kind of rebut what Zaki was saying. That I completely agree with you that when we look back on with the annals of history, and when we have the luxury of time and some more perspective, then yes, everything will be looked at as a whole. But for this film,
sure.
And in fact, I took my stepson and some of his friends to go see this film who are Marvel fans, but hadn't seen lots of the movies. And so, this may have been like their 5th or 6th movie that they had gone to see. So so obviously the emotional impact of everything that was transpiring wasn't necessarily as great for them as it was for those of us that have consistently watched over the last 10 years. But at the same time, they were able to say, like, wait a minute, I mean, this can't be, you don't want someone walking out of the theater saying, man, that movie was great, but I know that the end isn't going to stick. Mm-hmm. You want people to walk out of the theater to say, man, the movie was great. That ending sucked because it was so sad. I can't wait to see the next one because I hope that some of these guys come back.
Like a real sense of disorientation.
Right, exactly. As opposed to, I know these guys are going to come back. And then what happens, and then what happens after they come back? That there's that sense of mystery could have been upheld And that sense of disorientation could have been upheld had they chosen different characters to dust, as opposed to the ones that have announced sequels. You know?
I maintain that I think they just needed to have like a coda with the remaining Avengers having some sort of emotional reaction and resolution, so that the mystery set up a mystery of like, we know they're coming back because we know they're coming back. You Marvel, I'm just talking to you, Marvel. You know they're coming back. Like, come on, like, don't play like we don't know this.
Right.
So, like, to me, it felt like I guess in music, like pieces of music always end on like the note that is the key that the song is in, and if it doesn't, it feels unfinished.
Right.
And that's what this was. It was like not finishing the song where you think it should go, because it was like against it was something a little bit outside of the language of storytelling in movies and how you conclude a movie.
Right.
And it was more like a mid-season finale or something like that. Which I think really it speaks to a broader issue, which is kind of like, how much does Marvel have to make these movies individual movies? I mean, essentially they are like billion-dollar giant episodes of TV in a long-running series, and so they don't have to conform to those sort of structures that we like to see for plots of films. But for me, I watch a lot of movies and I expect a certain level of conclusion at the end of a film, and when it wasn't there, it was real hard for me.
Well, and these ones are a little different because you're right. If you're going to create a shared universe with superheroes, then it almost demands an episodic structure. The DC extended universe is shulking that a little bit. I mean, that's obviously not by design, at least not anymore. But they're a little more self-contained when looking at something like Man of Steel or like Wonder Woman, whereas all of the Marvel movies, to varying degrees, are connected to the larger shared universe, except for like Guardians 2 and one or two of the other ones. But I mean, this just kind of, it goes back to the idea of, okay, well, what do we know that's coming down the pike? Who is left outside of a couple of other characters? It's the original core Avengers, at least as far as, I mean, we haven't seen Hawkeye yet, but I'm going to presume that Hawkeye is around. Maybe that's a fatal presumption on my part, but I mean, out of the original Avengers, I have a hard time seeing Black Widow go, because now there's buzz around Marvel actually seeking out a director for her solo movie.
For her prequel movie. It's a prequel.
Oh, it's a prequel. Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. All right. Well, I guess
it's still a solo movie.
That kind of puts all of them up on the chopping block. I have a hard time seeing Thor go. If he wasn't going to go in a movie called Ragnarok, then I have a hard time seeing him go in anything else.
Right.
But here's my thing when it comes to the ending. Because I saw, where did I see it? I think it was at The Verge. There was an opinion piece that said the Avengers Infinity War ending is not brave because no one takes it seriously. And it was a decent thesis, but what's the alternative? They don't do that? Because if they don't do that, then it just gets accused of being more of the same. Right.
Right.
So what is the alternative? Do they do something that has a more final ending with Thanos being beaten and move along from there? Or was it worth dipping into the possible risk of emotionally checking out, as Cicero put it, than it would be to weather more critiques? Because the MCU does regularly get critiques of being more of the same by both critics and fans.
Sure.
So does Avengers Infinity War fall into that category because of this ending?
Well, I think the issue isn't what they chose to do. Or at least for me, my issue is who they chose to do it to.
Right. And I understand that.
And that creates the emotional resonance. If again, much to your chagrin, if it were Cap, and like Zaki has already said, I fully believe that when this is all said and done in 2019, for goodness sakes, but in 2019, once we've seen whatever the sequel to Infinity War is, once we're done watching that, there will be real tears shed, because there will be a character that we've lived with and cheered for and feared for and cared about over the greater part of this decade will be gone. To that point,
right. Kevin Feige himself even said that Avengers 4 serves as a dividing line.
Yeah.
In that all of the movies that Marvel Studios creates, the MCU as a whole will be looked at in two ways. Everything that came before Avengers 4
right.
and everything that comes after it.
Right.
So, I mean, they're setting themselves up a little too much. Like he even said...
It sounds like he's bracing us for a bunch of crappy movies.
Remember when the MCU was good before?
Oh, yeah. That's going to come. It's going to come in the same way that the Lone Ranger movies were denigrated near the end of their lifespans, I'm sure. Yeah. But, no, I mean... It's a curious statement because so Avengers 4 is going to serve as this primary dividing line, and we don't really have a full idea of what that means, but they're setting themselves up so much. Now they're putting even more additional pressure on what this movie was going to be. Feige even said they've already shot themselves in the foot by withholding the title for Avengers 4.
Right.
Because he said, well, the intent was to not take attention off of Infinity War.
Which is exactly
and that
what it
has
did.
backfired.
Right.
Which is
exactly what
that
it did.
totally backfired.
Mm-hmm.
So he says, no, it's just a title. Like, don't even concern yourself with it too much. He's already trying to downplay the selection of the title for the next Avengers movie.
They can't stop the press train, the hype train on these films now. Seriously, once we got, actually, I think it was by the time we had reached the Avengers, like Iron Man was an experiment. And Favreau knocked it out of the park. The casting, of course, was perfect. And then we got actually a really decent Hulk movie. And it's just, and just that the actor, can't work with anyone. So, we got an even better Bruce Banner as a result of that. But, and once we got Captain America, once they were able to get all of those guys together in a film and Joss Whedon was able to make that work, the hype train was, the hype train had left the station. So any announcement with regards to characters in the MCU, movies within the MCU, they're going to be discussed and dissected. And, every letter of every title will have some kind of think piece or hot take about it. So there's no way to stop that, to stop those types of dissection and that type of discourse from happening. So that was a foolhardy endeavor by Kevin Feige to try and stop that from happening.
Yeah.
You can't stop the fanboys, baby.
No, I don't think so. All right. Well, Rachel, do you have any other things you want to offer as far as what you didn't like about the movie?
Not right now. No.
Not right now. Okay. All right. Cicero, besides your expressions of checking out at the end of the movie, was there anything else that you did not like about it?
No. I mean, even though I'm emotionally checked out, I still love this film. I thought it was phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. Great. And particularly as a follow-up to, I got to say, man, I love T'Challa's part in this movie. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't expecting him to be as involved as he was, but and he not that he had a huge part, but he had an important one,
right? And
which I thought was awesome.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, and there, you're if you scour the internet enough, you'll find people that that fall into your camp, and you'll find people that fall into the camp that says, oh, T'Challa wasn't in it enough, and you'll find that about every single character that was in that film, which means that they did an incredible job of balancing the involvement of every single character. I mean, honestly, I think it's inarguable that to say that the most important characters in this film outside of Thanos were Doctor Strange and Iron Man and then maybe Thor. Those were, they were the heroes that kind of drove these stories. But I feel like it was, what an amazing feat it was for them to take all of these characters and leave everyone feeling either A, their favorite character got enough to do, or B, their favorite character didn't get enough to do, while other characters got enough to do. I mean, that is an incredible feat.
Absolutely.
I think the Loki fangirls
yes.
might disagree with you.
That is true. All 7 of them. You are correct.
No, there's a lot.
What an arc Loki gets in the MCU, though.
Yes.
Like, I was thinking about that. I was like, he dies a hero.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A rare chance.
Yeah. Right.
That's
and in fact, when he goes on the heel turn, when he's sucking up to Thanos, your heart,
it's like, oh, Loki.
Yeah, right. So your heart sinks a little because you're so disappointed in him, but then you're like, oh, it's Loki. That's, Loki does what Loki does. It's just Loki doing Loki. But you're hoping that he doesn't, and then you see the knife materialize and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right. And then, because even before that, like, Loki is there and he's like, yeah, I don't care, and blah, 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 blah. And he's like, yeah, you're going to die just like every other Asgardian. And he's like, I'm not Asgardian. And we've got a Hulk. And you're like, yes. Yes.
He held that in his back pocket for the last 6 years.
Right, exactly. And, just look at the two of them. They went from being, he went from being a puny god to being able to call this guy out as his enforcer. They've done an incredible job with these films, man.
Yeah.
You sit back and you really try and analyze what they were able to do collectively over the last 10 years. It's just been, I've never seen it done before.
No, same here. Well, Zaki, as another resident cinematic critic, if you put on your hardcore critical hat, then what does it tell you about Avengers Infinity War?
I mean, it's a very, very solid entry in a continually unfolding mythology. So that's, having seen it multiple times now, whatever qualms I had have really, they've dusted away as if Thanos snapped his fingers. Because what I'm left with is the emotional highs and lows. I mean, the stuff I think about is when Captain America makes his appearance for the first time.
Oh my God.
And that music goes when Thor shows up on the field of battle and the Avengers theme just blasts on the soundtrack. When Doctor Strange is facing off against Thanos and he duplicates himself and there's hundreds of him. It's this comic book world that's been realized so completely. And really the name of the game is patience. Marvel patiently just parceled out little pieces of thread, and then 10 years later they've sewn us a sweater.
Yes.
And that's how we got here. And not to make the DC comparison again, but watching it again just the other day, I mourned for the DC movie universe that we may never get that could have been on par with this.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, mistakes were made.
I
think that's fair. And as someone, and I know that you enjoyed Justice League as well, Zaki. But
I did.
There was a little too much faith in a single person to draw, because I think that's the core fundamental difference between the two, is that Marvel, yes, they have one primary ringleader, but they didn't put all their eggs into the basket of a single filmmaker who turned in a movie that was good, but that wasn't as universally praised as something like Iron Man was. And
it should have been Jeff Johns. He should have been the guy. He should have been their Feige.
You're speaking my language in so many ways, and I could totally go off on a tangent about that, but I really, really shouldn't.
Life is long, Chris.
Yes.
You may yet.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
Who knows what the future holds?
I know. Well, I mean, who knows? Things could turn around. You never know. Like they have a pretty decent guy in charge, at least from what I understand, of the future of DC movies. So let's just bang the drum for Aquaman for the next few months and hope that it's as good and solid as I'm sure James Wan could make it if given the proper time to do so. But one other thing that I did want to mention,
tiptoe over that bar.
Hey, I mean, he's definitely an unsung hero in a lot of ways. So if any superhero can surprise people at the movies, I think it's Aquaman. Okay. But we'll see. We will see. One thing that I did want to mention, because Zaki, you brought it up about Thor coming up onto the battlefield. In 10 years, we've had upwards of nearly 20 movies. We will have the 20th movie this coming summer. And the musical legacy of the MCU is hit and miss, to say the least. I think that's relatively fair to say. Yeah. But holy hell, if anything has managed to attach on to the superhero musical zeitgeist, like something along the lines of Danny Elfman's Batman score, then I think it's Alan Silvestri's Avengers theme. I mean, it's clearly the most iconic and oft repeated musical theme in the entire MCU series, as it should be. Like, it's great that no single score overshadows the Avengers theme, because the Avengers are, the standard bearers of the entire universe. But I underestimated how much power that theme had over me, because the arrival of Cap, which is my favorite part in the movie, and the arrival of Thor just pounded me emotionally in ways that I did not expect. And a lot of that is due to the music. Those scenes the Cap scene might play pretty cool, but neither of them would play nearly as well as they do without that music.
Yeah, agreed.
Oh, yeah.
So, very good.
I just want to say that I said a lot of bad things about the movie, but after Civil War, I was the least interested in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that I'd ever been. And now, after Infinity War, I am the most interested in the MCU that I've ever been. So it made me feel bad feelings, but I guess they did what they wanted to do, because I want to kind of rewatch all the movies now and get a better appreciation.
Okay. Well, we'll get on that.
Maybe I shouldn't have said anything.
Be careful. I'm getting the Phase 1 briefcase right now that we have on our shelf. All right. Well, I think we've pretty much gone round and round on Avengers Infinity War. So let's wind this down with some final thoughts. Cicero, what are your final thoughts concerning Avengers Infinity War? Where do you think it stands in the overall MCU? Are you planning on seeing it again while it's still in theaters? Give us a whole shebang.
Where does it stand? So, it is definitely in my upper echelon. I don't know if it's on my Mount Rushmore of Avengers films or MCU films yet. But that bar is that that Mount Rushmore has some heavy hitters on it. I left with a gigantic smile on my face. I left evangelizing the film to my friends without giving spoilers, saying you must go see this film. It is a phenomenal film. I will see it again. I've already paid for it twice and seen it once. I fell asleep on it the second time, not because I was bored, but because I was tired and had driven. I had driven for 7 hours and was up for like 18 before I laid down in a reclining chair to watch the film.
Oh Lord.
So it was just a mistake. But I did wake up to laugh and then fell right back to sleep. So that was fantastic. I can't wait to go see it again. I will like to go see it in IMAX 3D to get the full experience of it. It is definitely a film that I don't mind giving my money to, and can't wait to add it to my collection of permanent films, whether it be digital or physical.
Yeah. All right. Very well said. Zaki, where do you see it as far as the wider pantheon of the MCU is concerned? Are you going to see it again, and your full final thoughts?
This is a peek behind the curtain, but I liked the movie so much that we had to pause the recording so that I could go watch it and see it. So when we started recording, I'd seen it twice, and now as we wrap up, I've seen it thrice. That should tell you all something.
It's true. I can vouch for that.
The magic of it. But yeah, sorry, Chris. I don't mean to give away the game.
That's okay. I think it's fine.
We gotta keep it real. But I've long since given up ranking these movies because to me, what I've just come to realize is I love this universe, and I love every couple months we get to come back here. I may like X entry more than Y entry, but I know going into the theater, I will probably enjoy myself because I just get to visit with my friends again. And I can safely say there's never been a franchise quite like the MCU. And I love that it exists, and I love that I'm able to experience it. And I especially love that I'm able to experience it with my kids who have a relationship with the Marvel characters that is completely distinct and separate from the one I had as a kid, which is primarily through the comics. They are through the movies, but they are just as passionate and in love with it as I was. And man, isn't that great?
That is phenomenal.
Oh yeah, they get to grow up in the world that we dreamt of as comic book
That's
fans.
right. So true.
Which is pretty awesome. As for my final thoughts, well, I mean, like I said in a written quote-unquote review, I can't really review this movie, and I still feel pretty strongly about the fact that it's not a complete story. But, I also have read Thanos Quest, Infinity Gauntlet, Infinity War, so I kind of have an idea of how this is all going to shake out. But regardless of that, moment to moment, you will not find a movie that rewards you more for paying attention to the last 10 years worth of films that this studio has put out. It just further solidified my love of the characters that are created in comic book storytelling, particularly from, visionaries like Jack Kirby and I like Stan Lee too, but I'm a big Kirby guy. So I tend to look at him with a little more reverence, but, these characters that sprung from those men's brains 50 years ago. And, we've already gotten, or longer, but we've already gotten other characters that have come into the mix that have been around more recently. And they've just added to such a wonderful tapestry. Yes, like Zaki, I'm disinclined to rank the movies. I had to for my job recently, so there is that. But that's because I was forced to. The only ranking that I'll put on the MCU is that Thor: The Dark World is still kind of in last place. But other than that, there's everything else. That one. I mean, it's fine, but it's the one that I enjoy watching.
Right. But Age of Ultron is probably right above that.
Oh, really? You didn't? Oh, see, maybe.
Oh man, hold on. That's a whole nother podcast.
Oh yeah. Don't open up that can of worms,
Right.
man. You don't know.
I got some things to say about Age of Ultron too.
Oh, you guys, I gotta put my boxing gloves on. It seems. Oh boy, figuratively.
Right.
Figurative boxing gloves.
Yeah.
I don't actually box my wife. That would be terrible.
Boxing
You would
gauntlets.
lose.
Yeah, I would probably lose anyway.
Boxing gauntlet.
She'd kick my. What are you kicking the table for?
I'm sorry.
Jeez. God. Anyway, so Avengers: Infinity War, very consequential film. Highly recommended, I think.
Yeah.
Fair to say
Yeah,
from all of us.
easily.
Right? Yeah. Especially if you've been paying attention to the MCU over the course of its life. One last thing that I do want to bring up for those of us that have read the comics. Do you think this is going to, first of all, is Adam Warlock going to show up? Because he was hinted at the end of Guardians Volume 2. And for those of you that may have read the comics that this movie seems to be based off of, at least on a peripheral basis, Adam Warlock is a big character in the story, though he may have been replaced sort of by Doctor Strange in the movie version of Infinity War. But do you think this is all going to come down to the Soul Stone again, like where everybody might be residing as we wait to see what the next movie is going to show us?
Well, that definitely seems like that's the case. When you see Thanos after he snaps his fingers, you've got to assume that that's where he went, where he saw baby Gamora, or young child Gamora, who asked him what the cost was.
Yeah, it's hard to tell if that was literal or not. I'm not completely sure just because of the way it was photographed. But we'll see. Zaki, I don't know. Zaki, what do you think?
I'm not ruling it out, but I will be very, very shocked if Adam Warlock is a factor in how this story resolves itself. It feels a little too Deus Ex Machina to just suddenly have him show up. And when he appeared in the Infinity Gauntlet comic, he had existed in the universe, so he wasn't. He was somewhat of a known quantity. I think that Captain Marvel will play that role.
Sure.
And they're very deliberately releasing her origin movie, like 2 months before Infinity War Part 2 comes out, so that you can be like, oh, we just met her, now here she is. So that makes more sense to me.
Yeah. I think that makes sense too. I mean, I'm pretty excited for Captain Marvel, guys. I have to admit. I had been on the job for a few years when Carol actually graduated up to being Captain Marvel, but just everything that I've heard about the movie concerning its 90s nostalgia, the presence of Coulson, the presence of Ronan the Accuser, and seeing Carol Danvers in a movie for the first time, that's going to be pretty awesome, I think.
Concur.
More Ronan, right?
More Ronan, more Lee Pace all day, every day.
All right, well, so that is going to conclude our detour into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The next time you hear us, we will firmly plant our feet back into the Alpha Quadrant and talk more specifically about something in the Star Trek universe. But as for right now, that is going to do it for episode number 21 of Discovery Debrief. We hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, please like and follow us on our social media channels. And if you'd be so kind, we'd also appreciate it if you wrote a review for the show on iTunes or Facebook. It only takes a minute, and we'll be happy to read your review on the air when it is posted. If you have any questions, you can follow the show on Twitter at DSC Debrief, where you can also find all of our individual Twitter handles. And feel free to send us questions through Twitter, our Facebook like page, or by emailing us at hailingfrequencies@discoverydebrief.com. Please be sure to set your courses for this feed for future episodes that will, in fact, be forthcoming. And they'll talk about Star Trek. How about that? But keep your eyes on our social media channels, and hopefully we'll have quite a few surprises coming for you very soon, especially if you're a fan of the Star Trek franchise over the last 15 years, 20 years, thereabouts. Should have some pretty exciting stuff. As always, though, thanks again to our bold panel of Star Trek franchise explorers, and until we meet again, Avengers Assemble. Go boldly, my friend.